This is The Wicklings and the Pirate Treasure, written by Barrel Coops.
Book 3. A tale of courage, curiosity, and the quiet magic of memory, The Wicklings and the Pirate Treasure invites readers to listen closely, because some secrets are meant to be found.
The Wicklings and the Pirate Treasure.
Chapter 1. The Whisper in the Walls. Pomfret House was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that came with sleep or snowfall, but the kind that made Mary Pomfret pause halfway down the corridor and listen. The kind that made her wonder if the house itself was holding its breath. She clutched the old map tighter in her hand. It had been weeks since she and the Wicklings uncovered the truth about Hollow Hearth and the scandal buried beneath the drawing room hearthstone. Since then, the house had settled into a strange stillness, as if it knew its secrets had been disturbed. But tonight, something was different. Mary had heard it first while brushing her hair, a faint tapping sound, like fingernails on wood. Then a whisper soft and low, coming from the east wing. She'd followed it, lantern in hand, heart thudding. Now she stood outside the sealed panel that led to the Wickling tunnels. "Are you sure it came from here?" Beatrix asked, appearing beside her with a flickering candle. Mary nodded. It wasn't wind. It was deliberate. Stanley and Sidney joined them, thimble-sized tools tucked into their belts. "Let's open it," Sidney said. "If something's whispering, it might be Wickling business." Mary pressed the notch in the wall. With a soft click, the panel swung open. The tunnel beyond was dark and narrow, lined with bricks and cobwebs. But something glinted in the candlelight, a scrap of parchment pinned to the wall with a rusted nail. Beatrix pulled it free and unfolded it carefully. "It's Wickling script," she murmured. "But old. Very old." She read aloud. "The mark of the captain lies beneath the house. The treasure sleeps where the watchers cannot see. Beware the spiral flame." Mary's breath caught. "The captain?" Stanley's eyes widened. "Do you think it means a pirate?" Sidney grinned. "I hope it means a pirate." Beatrix frowned. The spiral flame, that symbol was on the hollow hearth mural. It marked danger. Mary turned to the map. "There's a new mark. It wasn't here before." She pointed to a faint symbol near the cellar, an anchor wrapped in vines. "That's new," Beatrix said. "It wasn't on the map last time." Mary's voice was quiet. "Then the house is still speaking." They followed the tunnel downward, past the chamber where they'd found the journal, past the Wickling-sized table, and the sealed hatch to Hollow Hearth. The air grew colder, the walls damper. At the base of the tunnel, they reached a door Mary had never seen before. It was Wickling-sized, made of driftwood and bound with iron. A carving above the frame showed a ship with torn sails and a Pomfret crest. Beatrix touched the carving. "This is it. The captain's mark." Mary knelt and opened the door. Inside was a small room, circular and lined with stone. In the center sat a chest, no larger than a shoebox, wrapped in chains and sealed with wax. Sidney whistled. "That looks promising." Beatrix examined the seal. "It's Pomfret wax, from the old family crest." Mary's fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside the chest was a bundle of papers, a compass with a cracked glass face, and a single gold coin stamped with a skull and crossed acorns. Stanley gasped. "That's pirate currency." Beatrix unfolded one of the papers. "It's a ledger. Ship names, cargo lists, and payments." Mary leaned closer. "This is proof. The Pomfrets weren't just hiding Wicklings. They were hiding something else." Sidney nodded. "Treasure." Beatrix's voice was low. "And secrets." Mary looked at the compass. Its needle spun wildly, then stopped, pointing not north, but toward the far wall. "There's more," she whispered. They pressed their hands to the stone. It was cold, solid, but something hummed beneath it. A vibration. A whisper. Mary turned to the others. "We're not done." Beatrix folded the ledger carefully. "Then we keep going." Sidney grinned. "And maybe we find a pirate's treasure." Mary smiled, but her thoughts were already racing. The house was speaking again. And this time, it was telling a story of gold, betrayal, and a captain whose name had been forgotten. Chapter 2. The Tunnel to Highgrove. Sidney had been planning the trip for weeks. He'd drawn maps, packed satchels, and memorized every twist and turn of the mole tunnels that ran beneath Pomfret House and stretched all the way to Highgrove. Beatrix had helped, of course. She was better at remembering which tunnels were safe and which ones had collapsed years ago. Their uncle, Thistlewick, lived in a quiet nook beneath the conservatory at Highgrove House. He was a retired tunnel engineer, famous among Wicklings for designing the spiral vaults beneath the old opera house. Sidney idolized him. "We'll be back before supper," Sidney said confidently, tightening the straps on his satchel. Beatrix raised an eyebrow. "You said that last time. We got stuck behind the pantry wall for 3 hours." "That was a minor miscalculation," Sidney replied. "This time, I've triple-checked the route." They slipped out through the east wing panel and into the mole tunnels, narrow, earthy passages carved long ago by generations of Wicklings and their mole allies. The air was cool and smelled of damp soil and root tangles. Sidney held up a tiny lantern. Tunnel 3A. Straight through to the garden border, then down past the old mole den. Beatrix followed, her own lantern casting soft shadows on the curved walls. "Do you think Uncle Thistlewick will tell us about the opera vaults?" Sidney grinned. "He has to. I brought my notebook." They moved quickly, ducking under low arches and stepping over root clusters. The tunnels were quiet, save for the occasional drip of water and the distant rustle of earthworms. But as they reached the halfway point, just beneath the new garden fence, Beatrix stopped. "Do you hear that?" Sidney paused. A faint creaking sound echoed through the tunnel, followed by a low rumble. Then crack. The ceiling above them split. A wooden stake, driven deep into the soil from above, punched through the tunnel wall. Earth crumbled. Roots snapped. The tunnel groaned. "Run!" Sidney shouted. They scrambled backward, but the collapse was faster. Soil poured in like water, choking the passage. Dust filled the air. Beatrix grabbed Sidney's arm and pulled him into a side tunnel just as the main passage sealed shut behind them. Silence. Sidney coughed, brushing dirt from his face. That was not on the map. Beatrix looked back at the collapsed tunnel. The gardener must have driven a stake for the new fence. Straight through the main route. Sidney's voice was tight. "We're trapped." Beatrix lit her lantern again. The side tunnel was narrower, older, aligned with cracked stone and tangled roots. "We'll have to find another way," she said. Sidney nodded, trying to stay calm. "There's a backup route. Tunnel 4C. It's longer, but it might still be open." They moved slowly, the air growing colder. The walls here were rougher, carved by mole claws rather than Wickling tools. Beatrix ran her fingers along the wall. "These tunnels haven't been used in years." Sidney tried to smile. "Then it's an adventure." But the smile faded quickly. The tunnel twisted and dipped, and soon they reached a fork, one path sloping upward, the other plunging deeper underground. Beatrix hesitated. "Which way?" Sidney checked his map. Neither smirked. They chose the downward path, hoping it would loop back toward Highgrove. The air grew thick, and the lanterns flickered. Strange markings appeared on the walls, claw symbols, spirals, and a faded paw print. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the tunnel. Low, gravelly, familiar. Well, what have we here?" Sidney froze. Beatrix's eyes widened. From the shadows emerged a mole, larger than any they'd seen before. His fur was black as coal, his nose crooked and scarred. He wore a patch over one eye and a belt of digging tools across his chest. "Black Nose," Beatrix whispered. "The infamous tunnel rogue." Stories of him were told in hushed voices, how he once dug beneath a castle moat and stole a silver teaspoon, how he vanished into the deepest tunnels and returned with a map no one could read. Black Nose sniffed the air. "Pomfret Wicklings say, you're far from home." Sidney stepped forward. "We're trying to reach Highgrove." The tunnel collapsed. Black Nose grunted. "Saw it happen." Gardeners got no respect for the old ways. Beatrix looked hopeful. "Can you help us?" Black Nose tilted his head. "Maybe, but I don't work for free." Sidney reached into his satchel and pulled out a tiny compass. "It's Wickling made. Still works." Blacknose examined it, then nodded. Fair trade. He turned and began to dig, his claws slicing through the earth with practiced ease. Follow me, he said. But stay close. These tunnels don't like strangers. Sidney and Beatrix exchanged a glance, then followed. The journey was far from over. But with Blacknose leading the way, they had a chance. Chapter 3. The Pirate's Mark. Mary sat alone in the attic, the pirate coin resting in her palm. Its surface was worn smooth, but the markings were still clear, a skull and crossed acorns on one side, and a jagged compass rose on the other. It felt heavier than it should, like it carried a secret. Stanley and Poppy sat nearby, poring over the old map they'd found beneath the stables. The compass from the chest lay beside them, its needle twitching erratically. This coin wasn't just dropped, Stanley said. It was placed. Someone wanted it to be found. Mary nodded. And the compass keeps pointing toward the garden wall. But the map says the next clue is in the drawing room. Poppy tilted her head. That's where the watchers used to spy, right? The hidden vents and slits. Mary stood. Then let's go. If the Pomfrets were hiding something, it might still be there. They crept through the quiet halls of Pomfret House, avoiding the creaky boards and the curious cat that liked to nap on the stairwell. The drawing room was empty, its fireplace cold and its curtains drawn. Mary knelt beside the hearthstone, the same one where they'd found the scandalous ledger weeks ago. Stanley tapped the floorboards. There's a hollow spot here. Mary ran her fingers along the edge and found a small notch. With a gentle push, the board lifted, revealing a shallow cavity beneath. Inside was a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Poppy unwrapped it carefully. It's another map. This one was different, drawn on parchment so thin it crackled at the edges. The ink shimmered faintly, and the lines twisted through unfamiliar terrain, fields, cliffs, and what looked like a shoreline. Stanley pointed to a symbol near the top, a ship with torn sails and the Pomfret crest. That's the same ship from the mural and hollow hearth. Mary's heart raced. Then the Pomfrets weren't just hiding treasure. They were part of it. Poppy examined the corner of the map. There's a name. Captain R. Mary sat back, the pieces clicking into place. Captain R was the pirate. The one who made a deal with Lord Alaric Pomfret. Stanley frowned. But why hide the map here? Mary turned the parchment over. On the back was a message. To those who seek the truth. The treasure lies beyond the garden gate. Follow the compass. Trust the flame. Beware the watchers. Poppy's voice was hushed. The garden gate is locked. Mary nodded. But I know where the key is. They returned to the attic, the compass spinning wildly. Mary looked at her friends. We're close. Stanley grinned. To treasure. Mary smiled. And to the truth. The pirate's mark had led them to a second map. And the adventure was just beginning. Chapter 4. Trapped Below. The tunnels grew darker as Blacknose led the way. Sidney and Beatrix followed closely, their lanterns casting flickering shadows on the damp walls. The air was thick with the scent of earth and moss, and the silence was broken only by the rhythmic scrape of Blacknose's claws. Keep your steps light, he grunted. These tunnels haven't been reinforced in decades. Beatrix glanced at Sidney. Are we still heading toward Highgrove? Blacknose snorted. Eventually. First, we get past the collapse. Then we find the Old Mole Junction. From there, it's a straight dig. Sidney nodded, trying to stay calm. He'd never been this deep in the tunnels before. The walls here were older, carved by claws rather than tools, and the markings were unfamiliar, spirals, slashes, and faded paw prints that seemed to watch them as they passed. Why do these tunnels feel different? Beatrix asked. Blacknose didn't answer immediately. He paused at a fork, sniffed the air, then turned left. These were built during the Great Burrowing, he said at last. Back when moles and Wicklings worked together to escape the surface wars. Most don't know they exist. Sidney's eyes widened. You mean these tunnels are ancient? Older than Pomfret House, Blacknose said. Older than Highgrove. They walked in silence for a while, the weight of history pressing in around them. Then the tunnel narrowed sharply, forcing them to crouch. Blacknose stopped. We're close. He tapped the wall with a claw. It rang hollow. Behind this is the junction, he said. But it's sealed. Beatrix stepped forward. Can we dig through? Blacknose nodded. With care. He began to dig, his claws slicing through the packed earth. Sidney and Beatrix helped where they could, clearing loose soil and holding lanterns steady. After several minutes, the wall gave way with a soft crack, revealing a narrow chamber beyond. But as they stepped through, the ground trembled. A low rumble echoed through the tunnel. Sidney froze. What was that? Blacknose sniffed. Something's shifting. The collapse must have weakened the structure. Suddenly, the ceiling cracked. Earth poured in from above, sealing the entrance behind them. They were trapped. Beatrix coughed, brushing dust from her face. We can't go back. Blacknose growled. Then we go forward. The chamber was small, with 3 branching tunnels. One sloped upward, one downward, and one was blocked by rubble. Sidney checked his map. None of these are marked. Blacknose examined the walls. This one, he said, pointing to the downward tunnel. It leads to the old mole vaults. There might be a way through. They followed him into the depths. The air grew colder, and the walls shimmered with mineral veins. Strange carvings appeared, symbols of mole clans long forgotten. Beatrix ran her fingers over one. This is the mark of the Blackroot clan, she whispered. They were tunnel guardians. Blacknose nodded. I trained with one of them. Before they vanished. Sidney's voice was quiet. Do you think they left anything behind? Blacknose didn't answer. They reached a wide chamber, its ceiling supported by thick roots and stone arches. In the center stood a mound of earth, and atop it, a carved stone tablet. Beatrix approached it slowly. It's a message. She read aloud. To those who dig in darkness. The way forward lies not in the walls, but in the silence between them. Sidney frowned. What does that mean? Blacknose stepped forward. It means we listen. He knelt, pressing his ear to the ground. Sidney and Beatrix did the same. At first, there was nothing. Then a faint sound. A trickle of water. A distant echo. A hollow space. There, Blacknose said. A hidden tunnel. He began to dig again, slower this time, listening between each stroke. After several minutes, the earth gave way to a narrow passage. Sidney peered inside. It's Wickling-sized. Beatrix smiled. Then it's ours. They crawled through the passage, the air growing warmer. The tunnel curved upward, and soon they saw light, faint, golden, and flickering. They emerged into a small chamber lit by a single lantern, left burning beside a pile of supplies. Sidney gasped. Uncle Thistlewick's cache. Beatrix grinned. We're close. Blacknose sniffed. Highgrove's just ahead. Sidney turned to him. Thank you. Blacknose shrugged. You paid. I delivered. He turned to leave, disappearing into the shadows. Beatrix watched him go. Do you think we'll see him again? Sidney smiled. If we do, it'll be when we least expect it. They gathered their things and prepared to move on. The tunnels had tested them. But they were still digging. And Highgrove was waiting. Chapter 5. The Captain's Ledger. The Pomfret library was quiet, its tall shelves casting long shadows in the late afternoon light. Mary tiptoed across the polished floor, careful not to let her boots squeak. Stanley and Poppy followed close behind, each carrying a satchel stuffed with maps, notes, and the mysterious pirate coin. We're looking for anything about Captain R, Mary whispered. Or about vaults, ships, or secret storage. Stanley nodded. There's a section on private family records. Over here. They reached a narrow shelf tucked behind a velvet curtain. The books here were older, their spines cracked and faded. Mary pulled out a slim volume bound in green leather. The Pomfret crest was barely visible on the cover. She opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten entries, ledgers, receipts, and notes. One page caught her eye immediately. Received, 3 crates, marked with acorns. Delivered by Captain R. Payment, 20 gold coins. Storage, Vault 3, beneath the stables. Poppy leaned in. Vault 3? That's not on any of our maps. Stanley frowned. It must be hidden. Maybe even sealed. Mary flipped through more pages. Captain R's name appeared again and again, always linked to mysterious deliveries, late-night transactions, and coded symbols. Then she found it. A separate ledger tucked between 2 pages, bound with twine and sealed with wax. She broke the seal. Inside was a detailed account of Captain R's dealings with Lord Alaric Pomfret. Ship names, cargo lists, and coded routes filled the pages. But near the end, the tone changed. The watchers grow bold. The treasure must be hidden where even they cannot see. I leave this record for those who seek truth, not gold. Follow the compass. Trust the flame. The vault lies beneath the place of rest. Mary's breath caught. The place of rest, the mausoleum? Stanley nodded slowly. It's on the edge of the estate. No one goes there anymore. Poppy looked uneasy. Do you think the treasure is buried with someone? Mary folded the ledger carefully. Not buried. Hidden. They returned to the attic, the compass spinning wildly. Mary laid out the pirate map, the coin, and the ledger. The pieces were falling into place. Captain R had smuggled something into Pomfret House, something valuable enough to hide beneath the stables and seal with wax. And Lord Alaric had helped him. But the final clue pointed somewhere else. To the mausoleum. To the vault beneath the place of rest. Mary looked at Stanley and Poppy. We're going there next. Stanley grinned. To find the vault? Mary nodded. To find the truth. Chapter 6. The Forgotten Passage. Sidney's boots squelched in the damp soil as he followed Beatrix through the narrow tunnel. The lantern light flickered against the curved walls, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. Behind them, the passage they'd escaped through with Black Nose had narrowed to a crawl space. Are you sure this is the right way? Sidney asked, glancing nervously at the map. Beatrix nodded. Uncle Thistlewick's cache was a good sign. We're close. But this part of the tunnel, it's not on any of our maps. Sidney frowned. Then how do we know it's safe? We don't, Beatrix said simply. But it's the only way forward. The tunnel sloped downward, the air growing cooler and more still. Strange markings appeared on the walls again, symbols carved deep into the stone, some Wickling, some mole. One resembled a spiral wrapped in thorns. Sidney paused. That symbol. It's like the one Mary found on the pirate coin. Beatrix studied it. It's older, but similar. Maybe the Wicklings weren't the only ones who knew about the treasure. They pressed on, the tunnel opening into a wide chamber supported by thick roots and stone columns. In the center stood a crumbling archway, half buried in soil. Sidney brushed away the dirt. There's writing. Beatrix leaned in. It's mole script. Very old. She read aloud. To those who seek the surface, the forgotten passage lies beneath the sleeping root. Dig with care. Speak with silence. Sidney looked around. Sleeping root. Beatrix pointed to a massive root curling along the wall, its bark pale and dry. Sidney knelt beside it and began to dig gently. The soil was loose, and after a few minutes, his fingers struck something hard. A hatch, he whispered. They cleared the earth and revealed a small wooden door, reinforced with iron bands. Beatrix found a latch hidden beneath a knot in the wood and pulled. The hatch creaked open. Beyond it lay a narrow tunnel, lined with smooth stone and faintly glowing moss. The air smelled fresher, tinged with the scent of grass and open sky. Sidney's eyes widened. This must lead to the surface. Beatrix nodded. Or close to it. They crawled through the passage, the moss lighting their way. After several minutes, the tunnel opened into a small chamber with a wooden ladder leading upward. Sidney climbed first, pushing open a trapdoor at the top. Sunlight streamed in. He blinked, then laughed. We're in the garden. Beatrix joined him, her face lighting up. We made it. They looked around. The trapdoor had opened beneath a thick hedge near the edge of Highgrove's grounds. The conservatory was visible in the distance, its glass roof gleaming in the sun. Sidney turned to Beatrix. Let's go see Uncle Thistlewick. But as they stepped forward, a shadow passed overhead. A figure stood at the far end of the garden, tall, cloaked, and watching. Beatrix froze. "Who's that?" Sidney narrowed his eyes. "I don't know. But they saw us." The figure turned and disappeared behind the conservatory. Beatrix grabbed Sidney's arm. "Come on. We need to warn Uncle Thistlewick." They ran toward the conservatory, hearts pounding. The forgotten passage had led them to safety. But something or someone was watching. They crept through the garden, sticking to the hedgerows and avoiding the gravel paths. Highgrove was quiet, but not empty. Somewhere nearby, a rake scraped against stone. A wheelbarrow creaked. The gardener was still working. They reached the conservatory and slipped through the side door. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the scent of citrus and soil. Rows of miniature plants lined the shelves, tiny bonsai trees, thimble-sized orchids, and a Wickling-sized lemon bush that glowed faintly in the sun. "Uncle Thistlewick?" Beatrix called softly. A rustle came from behind a curtain of hanging vines. Then a voice, "You're late." Uncle Thistlewick emerged, wearing a moss-green waistcoat and a pair of goggles perched on his forehead. His whiskers twitched with amusement. "I expected you hours ago," he said. "Tunnel 3A, wasn't it?" Sidney nodded. "Collapsed." The gardener drove a stake through it. Thistlewick sighed. "I warned them about that fence. Mole tunnels run deep, but they're not invincible." Beatrix stepped forward. "We had help." "Black Nose." Thistlewick's eyes widened. "Black Nose? That old rogue's still digging." Sidney grinned. "He saved us. Took a compass as payment." Thistlewick chuckled. "Fair trade. He's got a nose for trouble and treasure." Beatrix lowered her voice. "Speaking of treasure, we saw something strange. A figure in the garden. Watching us." Thistlewick's expression darkened. "Describe him." "Tall," Sidney said. "Cloaked." He vanished behind the conservatory. Thistlewick nodded slowly. "That's not the first time he's been seen. Some say he's a mole scout. Others say he's something older." Beatrix frowned. "Older." Thistlewick pulled a scroll from a drawer and unrolled it. It showed a network of tunnels, some marked in red, others in faded gold. "There's a passage," he said, "forgotten by most. It runs beneath the old orchard and into the cliffs. If the Watchers are returning, that's where they'll be." Sidney leaned over the map. "Can we reach it?" Thistlewick nodded. "But it's dangerous. The passage was sealed after the last flood. Only Black Nose knows the safe route." Beatrix looked at Sidney. "We need to find him again." Thistlewick handed them a small pouch. "Take this. It's a signal stone. Tap it 3 times near a tunnel mouth, and he'll hear it if he's listening." Sidney tucked it into a satchel. "Thank you." Thistlewick smiled. "You're Wicklings. You were born to dig deep." They left the conservatory and returned to the hedge, the signal stone in hand. The forgotten passage was waiting, and the Watchers were already moving. Chapter 7. The Map Beneath the Floorboards. The Pomfret mausoleum stood like a forgotten sentinel at the edge of the estate, its stone walls cloaked in ivy and silence. Mary had never dared go near it before, not because she was afraid, but because it felt like the kind of place that remembered things best left buried. But now, with the pirate map in hand and the compass needle pointing steadily toward its iron gate, she had no choice. Stanley and Poppy followed close behind, their satchels packed with lanterns, tools, and the captain's ledger. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the overgrown path. "This place gives me the shivers," Stanley muttered. Poppy nodded. "It smells like secrets." Mary pushed open the gate. It groaned, revealing a dim interior lined with stone plaques and faded carvings. Dust hung in the air like fog, and the temperature dropped as they stepped inside. "Look for anything unusual," Mary whispered. "A symbol. A seam. Anything." They moved slowly, checking each plaque and corner. Stanley tapped the floor with a thimble-sized hammer. "There's a hollow spot here." Mary knelt beside the central slab, a large stone engraved with the Pomfret crest. She ran her fingers along the edge and found a small notch. With a gentle push, the slab lifted. Beneath it was a narrow shaft lined with bricks and a rusted ladder descending into darkness. Poppy lit a lantern. We're going down there? Mary nodded. The ledger said the vault lies beneath the place of rest. They climbed down one by one, the lantern light flickering against the damp walls. At the bottom, they found themselves in a small chamber, circular, silent, and lined with wooden panels. Stanley tapped the floor again. Definitely hollow. Mary searched the edges and found a latch, nearly invisible beneath the dust. She pulled it gently. The floor creaked open. Inside was a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, tied with a faded ribbon. Mary lifted it out and unwrapped it slowly. It was a map, but not like the others. This one was drawn on thick parchment, its edges scorched and its ink faded to brown. The lines were jagged, looping through tunnels and chambers that didn't match any part of Pomfret House. Poppy studied it. This is older than the house. Stanley pointed to a symbol in the corner, a spiral flame. That's the warning mark. Mary turned the map over. On the back was a message written in looping script. To those who follow the captain's path. The treasure lies not in gold, but in truth. Beneath the watchers, beyond the flame. Seek the chamber where silence reigns. Poppy's voice was quiet. This isn't just a treasure hunt. It's a test. Mary nodded. And we're not the first to take it. They folded the map carefully and packed it away. The floorboards had hidden a secret. And the next step lay beyond the watchers. Where silence waited. Chapter 8. The Garden Gate. The hedge rustled softly behind them as Sidney and Beatrix crouched near the trapdoor, the signal stone clutched tightly in Sidney's hand. The sun had dipped below the trees, casting long shadows across Highgrove's garden. The conservatory windows glowed faintly, but the figure they'd seen earlier hadn't returned. I don't like this, Beatrix whispered. It's too quiet. Sidney nodded. Uncle Thistlewick said the watchers were moving again. If that cloaked figure was one of them. He didn't finish the thought. Instead, he tapped the signal stone 3 times against the edge of the trapdoor. The sound echoed faintly through the tunnel below. They waited. For a moment, nothing happened. Then tap, tap, tap. A reply. Sidney's eyes widened. He heard us. The trapdoor creaked open, and from the shadows below, Black Nose emerged. His fur was dusted with soil, and his crooked nose twitched as he sniffed the air. You rang, he said gruffly. Beatrix stepped forward. We need your help again. There's a passage beneath the orchard, one that leads to the cliffs. Black Nose, one good eye narrowed. The forgotten passage? Sidney nodded. Uncle Thistlewick said it was sealed after the flood. Black Nose grunted. Most wouldn't dare go near it. But I've dug through worse. He turned and beckoned them down. Come on. We'll need to go through the garden gate. Sidney hesitated. The gate's locked. Black Nose smirked. Not for me. They followed him through the tunnel, which curved beneath the garden paths and flower beds. The air grew cooler, tinged with the scent of damp roots and old stone. After several minutes, they reached a chamber with a low ceiling and a wooden door set into the wall. The garden gate. It was Wickling-sized, reinforced with iron bands and carved with mole symbols, spirals, claws, and a single flame. Black Nose tapped the door with a claw. This was built to keep things out, not in. Beatrix frowned. What kind of things? Black Nose didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his belt and pulled out a small iron key. He inserted it into the lock and turned. The gate creaked open. Beyond it lay a narrow tunnel, lined with smooth stone and glowing moss. The air was colder still, and the walls shimmered faintly with mineral veins. Sidney stepped inside. This doesn't feel like a Wickling tunnel. Black Nose nodded. It's older. Built by the deep moles. They vanished long ago. Beatrix shivered. Why did they seal it? Black Nose's voice was low. Because something was waking. They moved carefully through the passage, the lantern light casting long shadows. Strange markings appeared on the walls, symbols of mole clans, warnings, and faded paw prints. At the far end, the tunnel opened into a wide chamber with a domed ceiling and a single stone pedestal in the center. On it sat a scroll. Sidney approached slowly and unrolled it. The parchment was brittle, but the ink was clear. To those who dig too deep, the watchers are not what they seem. The treasure is guarded by silence. Speak not. Step lightly. The flame remembers. Beatrix looked at Blacknose. What does it mean? He stared at the scroll for a long moment. It means we're close. Sidney folded the scroll and tucked it into his satchel. The garden gate had opened, and the forgotten passage was no longer forgotten. Chapter 9. The Wickling Compass. The attic was unusually quiet. Mary sat cross-legged on the floor, the newly discovered map spread out before her. The parchment was scorched at the edges, its ink faded but still legible. The spiral flame symbol glared from the corner like a warning. Stanley and Poppy leaned in, their eyes wide with curiosity. This map doesn't match the house, Stanley said. It's older. The tunnels are different. Poppy nodded. And look, this chamber here. It's marked with a star. That's not a Wickling symbol. Mary reached into her satchel and pulled out the compass they'd found in the pirate chest. Its cracked glass face shimmered faintly in the lantern light. She held it flat in her palm. The needle spun once, then stopped. Not north. Not toward the stables, but toward the old orchard. That's where the watchers were seen, Mary whispered, and where the flame symbol reappeared. Stanley frowned. Do you think the compass is enchanted? Poppy tilted her head. Not enchanted. Attuned. Wickling compasses don't point north. They point to what's hidden. Mary's breath caught. Then it's leading us to the treasure. They packed the map and compass carefully and slipped out of the attic, moving quietly through the house. The sun had set, and the corridors were bathed in shadow. Outside, the orchard loomed wild, tangled, and long abandoned. The trees were gnarled and twisted, their branches reaching like fingers. The ground was uneven, littered with fallen apples and moss-covered stones. Mary held the compass steady. The needle pointed toward a cluster of trees near the far wall, where the orchard met the cliffs. There's something here, she said. Stanley knelt and brushed away leaves. A hatch. Poppy joined him. It's Wickling-sized, but the lock's rusted. Mary produced a small key from her satchel, the one she'd found hidden in the drawing room weeks ago. She inserted it into the lock and turned. Click. The hatch creaked open, revealing a narrow tunnel lined with stone and glowing moss. The air was cool and smelled of salt and soil. This must lead to the cliffs, Mary whispered. They climbed down carefully, the compass needle unwavering. The tunnel twisted and dipped, passing through chambers marked with ancient symbols, spirals, flames, and claw marks. At the end, they reached a circular room with a domed ceiling and a single pedestal in the center. On it sat a stone box. Mary approached slowly and opened it. Inside was a scroll, a small pouch of gold coins, and a carved wooden token bearing the Pomfret crest. Stanley read the scroll aloud. To those who followed the compass, the treasure is not gold, but memory. The truth lies in the vault beyond the flame. Speak not. Step lightly. The watchers are listening. Poppy's voice was hushed. This isn't the end. Mary nodded. It's the final clue. The compass had led them true. And the vault was waiting. Chapter 10. The Mole's Warning. The tunnel beyond the garden gate was colder than any they'd walked before. Sidney held the lantern high, its flickering light casting long shadows on the moss-lined walls. Beatrix followed close behind, her eyes scanning the strange symbols etched into the stone, spirals, claw marks, and a flame enclosed in a circle. Blacknose moved ahead of them, silent and swift, his claws occasionally tapping the walls as if listening to the stone itself. This place feels ancient, Beatrix whispered. Sidney nodded. Older than Pomfret House. Older than Highgrove. Blacknose stopped suddenly. He sniffed the air, then turned to face them. We're close to the vault. Sidney's heart skipped. The vault? The one from the scroll. Blacknose nodded. But it's not just a vault. It's a boundary. Beatrix frowned. Between what? Blacknose's voice dropped to a gravelly whisper. Between memory and silence. He led them into a wide chamber with a domed ceiling and a single stone pedestal in the center. The air was still, and the walls shimmered faintly with mineral veins. On the pedestal sat a carved stone tablet. Blacknose brushed away the dust and read aloud. To those who dig too deep, the watchers do not sleep. The flame remembers. The silence listens. Speak not. Step lightly. The vault is not yours to open. Sidney swallowed. That doesn't sound like a welcome. Beatrix stepped closer. It's a warning. Blacknose nodded. The deep moles built this place to protect something. Not just treasure, knowledge. Secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. Sidney looked around. Then why did Captainer come here? Blacknose's eye narrowed. Because he wanted what lay beyond the flame. He turned to the wall and tapped a section with his claw. A faint echo rang out. There's a tunnel here, he said. Sealed. But not forgotten. Beatrix stepped forward. Can we open it? Blacknose hesitated. We can. But once we do, we must be ready. Sidney nodded. We've come this far. Blacknose began to dig, slowly and carefully. The stone gave way to packed earth, and then to a narrow passage lined with Wickling-sized bricks. As they stepped inside, the air grew warmer. The walls pulsed faintly, as if remembering footsteps long gone. Sidney turned to Beatrix. Do you think Mary's found the other end? Beatrix smiled. If I know Mary, she's already halfway through the mystery. Blacknose paused and looked back. One last thing. They stopped. He pointed to a symbol carved into the wall, a spiral flame surrounded by claw marks. If you see this again, he said, don't speak. Don't run. Just listen. Sidney frowned. To what? Blacknose's voice was barely audible. To the silence. Chapter 11. The Treasure Beneath the Hearth. The drawing room was quiet, its fireplace cold and unused. Mary stood before the hearthstone, the Wickling compass in one hand and the scorched map in the other. Stanley and Poppy flanked her, their expressions tense with anticipation. This is where it ends, Mary whispered. Or begins. The compass needle pointed directly at the center of the hearth. The map's final clue, seek the chamber where silence reigns, had led them here. Beneath the watchers. Beyond the flame. Stanley knelt and tapped the stone. Still hollow. Poppy brushed away dust. There's a seam. Just like before. Mary reached into her satchel and pulled out the iron key she'd found in the mausoleum. It fit perfectly into a small notch near the base of the hearth. She turned it slowly. Click. The hearthstone shifted, revealing a narrow shaft lined with bricks and a ladder descending into darkness. They climbed down one by one, lanterns flickering. At the bottom, they entered a chamber unlike any they'd seen before. It was Wickling-sized, circular, and lined with polished stone. The walls were engraved with symbols, spirals, flames, acorns, and ships. In the center stood a pedestal, and atop it, a chest carved from driftwood and bound with iron. Mary approached slowly. She placed the compass on the pedestal. The needle spun once, then stopped. She opened the chest. Inside was a bundle of letters, a pouch of gold coins, and a small wooden box sealed with wax. Stanley opened the letters. They're from Captain R. To Lord Alaric Pomfret. Poppy unfolded one carefully and read aloud. The treasure is not gold, but legacy. The Wicklings kept their silence. The Pomfrets kept their secrets. Let those who find this remember. Truth is the greatest treasure of all. Mary opened the wax-sealed box. Inside was a single item, a carved medallion bearing both the Pomfret crest and the Wickling spiral. It shimmered faintly in the lantern light. Poppy's voice was hushed. It's a symbol of the alliance. Stanley nodded. Of the deal they made. And the truth they buried. Mary held the medallion tightly. We have to protect this. Not just the treasure, but the story. They packed the letters and coins carefully, leaving the chest where it was. The treasure had been found. But it wasn't gold. It was memory. It was truth. And it was theirs to guard. Chapter 12. The Reunion and the Secret. The attic was glowing with lantern light when Sidney and Beatrix finally returned. Mary looked up from the map spread across the floor, her eyes wide with relief. "You're back." Sidney grinned, brushing soil from his sleeves. "Barely. We had to crawl through half of Highgrove's garden and meet a mole who speaks in riddles." Beatrix stepped forward, holding out the scroll they'd found. "And we weren't the only ones digging. The Watchers are real. And they're listening." Stanley and Poppy gathered around as Mary unfolded the scroll. The message was clear. The treasure is guarded by silence. Speak not. Step lightly. The flame remembers. Mary nodded. "We found the vault. Beneath the hearth. Captain R's letters, the medallion, the truth." Sidney's eyes widened. "So it's real." Mary held up the carved medallion, half Pomfret crest, half Wickling spiral. "It's more than real. It's a legacy." Beatrix sat beside her. "Then what do we do with it?" The room fell quiet. Outside, the wind stirred the ivy on the windows. The house seemed to listen. Mary looked at the compass, now still. "We could tell everyone. Publish the letters. Reveal the scandal." Stanley frowned. "But what would that change?" Poppy nodded. "The treasure isn't gold. It's memory. And memory belongs to those who protect it." Sidney leaned back. "So we keep it secret?" Mary smiled. "No. We keep it safe." They packed the letters, the medallion, and the scroll into a wooden box and sealed it with wax. Then, together, they returned to the vault beneath the hearth and placed the box inside. Not buried. Preserved. As they climbed back into the attic, Mary turned to the others. "We'll write our own record," she said. "So one day, if someone else finds the compass, they'll know where to begin." Beatrix smiled. "And what to listen for?" Sidney grinned. "The silence." Poppy nodded. "The flame." Stanley tapped the map. "The truth." They sat together, the attic warm with lantern light and quiet laughter. Pomfret House had spoken. And the Wicklings had listened.
This was The Wicklings and the Pirate Treasure, written by Beryl Coops.
This was one of the books in this series of stories about the little folk, the Wicklings. If you enjoyed this short story, please check out the playlist under the family, comedy, humor, and feel-good title on my YouTube channel for more like this.
I hope you enjoyed my short story. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. I have written over 500 short stories over the years under many pen names. I will be updating these and recording them under the Beryl Coops name. I will be listing them on YouTube as fast as we can get them recorded. They will include historical drama, humor, adventure, romance, period drama, mystery, thriller, war stories, spy stories, revenge, horror, psychological horror, dystopian, disaster, children's stories, love stories, and more. Too many to name. Something for everyone. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up. It helps others find my channel. Until next time, thank you for listening to the end.